You know that moment when you finish a game and you're left with the feeling that you've experienced something truly special? Something that marked not only you, but an entire generation of players? Far Cry 3 was exactly that when it arrived in 2012. It wasn't just another first-person shooter. It was a visceral experience that threw you onto a paradisiacal island transformed into a nightmare, where every decision seemed to carry real weight. Ubisoft had managed to create something unique there, a perfect mix of freedom, tension, and narrative that gripped you from start to finish. What made Far Cry 3 so special wasn't just Vaas and his iconic phrases, nor just the refined gameplay. It was the genuine feeling of discovery, of exploring something new and dangerous, where you weren't sure what would come next. There was an intensity there, a constant tension that kept you on the edge of your seat. What made Far Cry 3 so addictive was the genuine freedom to choose how to survive. You could invade a pirate base head-on, rifle in hand and grenades flying, turning everything into a chaos of explosions and screams. Or you could stay in the shadows, using the knife and silenced weapons, marking enemies with the camera and eliminating them one by one without anyone noticing. Fire was your ally. You could burn an entire drug plantation and watch the flames spread completely organically, creating diversions or deadly traps. And when things got complicated, you threw a pebble to distract the guards. A simple mechanic, but one that made you feel really smart. Each outpost was a tactical puzzle where you decided the rules, and the game never punished you for experimenting. This mechanical variety wasn't just a checklist of features. It was the beating heart of the experience, giving you tools and saying, now fend for yourself. Far Cry 3 wasn't just about shooting pirates on a tropical island. It was about feeling the transformation of a spoiled playboy into something much darker. When you landed on the Rook Islands for the first time, it looked like a postcard from hell. Paradisiacal beaches stained with blood, lush forests full of predators waiting for you to slip up, and that constant feeling that at any moment something could go terribly wrong. The game threw you into the cold water from the start, making you understand that Jason Brody was as fragile as you felt holding the controller. And as you survived, killed, hunted, and explored, that tribal tattoo on his arm grew, a perfect visual reflection of how the game transformed you along with the character. It wasn't just skill progression, it was a permanent mark of how much you had sunk into that tropical nightmare. When we say that Far Cry 3 is the pinnacle of the series, it's not just nostalgia or fan exaggeration. It's a real recognition that that game achieved something that no other Far Cry has achieved before or since. Far Cry 3 arrived in 2012 and rescued a franchise that was almost falling into oblivion after the problems of Far Cry 2, and it did so in such a forceful way that it set the standard for all open-world games that came after. Critics gave it a score of 89 on Metacritic, and it won Game of the Year awards from important vehicles such as Electronic Gaming Monthly and GameSpot's Audience Choice. But the most impressive thing is not the numbers. It's the fact that even today, more than a decade later, fans continue to compare each new Far Cry with the third and feel that something essential has been lost along the way. That game had a perfect alchemy between mechanics, narrative, and atmosphere that simply worked in a way that seems impossible to replicate. The narrative of Far Cry 3 is striking precisely because it puts you at the center of a brutal psychological transformation that you feel happening as you play. Jason Brody starts out as a spoiled playboy on vacation with friends, completely unprepared for the hell that the Rook Islands had in store for him. And as you progress, seeing that tribal tattoo grow on his arm with each new skill unlocked, it becomes clear that it's not just about rescuing friends. It's about Jason getting lost in the violence, discovering that he's too good at it all and maybe even enjoying it more than he should. The game doesn't give you a ready-made hero. It makes you follow the simultaneous construction and deconstruction of a character who goes from frightened victim to lethal predator. And this progression doesn't just happen in the cutscenes, it's in the mechanics, in the way you become more confident in the shootouts, more creative in the approaches, more comfortable with the carnage. It's a narrative that intertwines with the gameplay in an organic way, making you question whether you're playing Jason or whether Jason is becoming you. And then there's Vaas Montenegro, who simply redefined what a video game villain could be. That madman wasn't just a generic antagonist waiting for you at the end of the game. He was a constant, unpredictable, disturbing presence in a way that made you tense every time he appeared on the screen. Michael Mando's performance was so intense, so visceral, that Ubisoft rewrote parts of the game just to give him more space. Vaas was philosophical and brutal at the same time, questioning you about madness while torturing people, making you wonder who was really the madman in that story, him or you. who killed hundreds without blinking. That monologue about the definition of insanity became iconic not by chance. It perfectly captured what the game was doing to you, making you repeat the same cycles of violence while expecting different results. And the other characters, from Citra and the Rock Yacht to Buck and Hoyt, all had that layer of tropical insanity that made each interaction memorable and unpredictable. The open world of the Rook Islands is where Far Cry 3 really shines as an immersive experience that pulls you in and doesn't let you go. That archipelago was alive in a way that few games have managed to replicate. You could be exploring a paradisiacal beach and suddenly be attacked by a crocodile, or be hunting a deer when a tiger decides that you look more appetizing. The islands had history engraved in every corner: Chinese temples hidden in deep caves, Japanese bunkers from the Second World War still haunted by ancient battles, Rakyat sanctuaries scattered throughout the dense jungle. They weren't just beautiful background scenery. They were places that told silent stories of centuries of conflict and violence in that piece of corrupted paradise. The way you could climb practically any mountain, dive into underwater caves full of sharks, fly with a wingsuit through the cliffs, or simply get lost in the forest. Hunting rare animals created a freedom of exploration that seemed genuine, not forced by checkpoints or mandatory missions. But what separated Far Cry 3 from other open-world games was the tactical freedom it gave you in each combat situation. Each outpost, each enemy base was a playground where you decided the rules of the game. You could go in Rambo style, going head-on with a rocket launcher and turning everything into explosive chaos. Or you could be surgical, marking enemies with the camera, eliminating them one by one with the knife and silenced weapons, freeing the outpost without firing a single alarm. And there were creative options, releasing wild animals from cages to create a deadly distraction, setting fire to the vegetation, and using the fire as a tactical weapon, using a bow and arrow with explosive arrows to make it look like an accident. The progression system with the skill tree of the spider, the heron, and the shark reinforced this, giving you increasingly lethal tools as you transformed into a more efficient predator. And the game never punished you for experimenting. On the contrary, it rewarded you for finding creative solutions, for testing the limits of what was possible to do in that violent sandbox. The atmosphere of Far Cry 3 was suffocating in a way that made you feel really trapped on those islands, even when you were dominating territorially. There was something in the air of the Rook Islands, a constant tension mixed with an almost obscene tropical beauty that created this disturbing contrast between paradise and hell. The soundtrack helped with this, with those moments of silence broken by jungle sounds, distant screams, explosions in the distance that reminded you that the island was in constant war. And when you were inside the main missions, that feeling of descent into the abyss became even stronger. The hallucinogenic sequences, the Rock Yacht ceremonies, the moments where reality was distorted and you no longer knew whether you were living or delirious. The game wasn't afraid to be uncomfortable, to make you question your choices, to show that that journey had a real psychological cost for Jason, and maybe for you too. It was immersion in the deepest sense, not just beautiful graphics or refined mechanics, but an experience that affected you emotionally and stuck in your head long after turning off the console. Jason Brody's transformation is undoubtedly one of the most striking elements of Far Cry 3, and when you start the game, it's evident that you're not dealing with a common shooter protagonist. Jason is literally a Los Angeles playboy who is on vacation with friends, taking photos, skydiving, and having fun without worries. The contrast between this carefree guy who appears in the early videos and the man he becomes is brutal. You feel it firsthand when he kills for the first time. His hands tremble, his breathing becomes irregular, and there's that palpable sense of discomfort. The game doesn't romanticize that first moment of violence, and that's crucial because it establishes the emotional starting point from which Jason will depart. It's rare to see a first-person shooter that really stops to show the weight of taking a life, especially for someone completely unprepared for it. What's really impressive about Jason's journey is how the early acts of the game treat him as a frightened amateur trying to survive. When he rescues Grant, his older brother and ex-military, you realize the difference between someone trained and someone who is improvising. Grant is the one who gives the orders, who knows how to move, and Jason is just following, trying not to die. But then Grant dies, and that death works as a devastating catalyst. Suddenly, Jason no longer has anyone to guide him, to be the alpha of the situation. He needs to become that or all of his friends will die too. The weight of this responsibility, combined with the trauma of seeing his brother killed in front of him, creates an explosive mixture of despair, anger, and determination that begins to shape who Jason will become. The game's progression mechanics reflect this transformation in a smart way that goes beyond simply gaining XP, getting stronger. Each tattoo that Jason receives tells part of his story, literally marking on his skin the skills he acquires and the lines he crosses. In the beginning, you're struggling with the controls, hiding behind rocks, using stealth because you don't have the confidence to face enemies head-on. But as the hours pass and you complete missions, capture outposts, hunt animals, and unlock skills, you feel Jason becoming more competent. It's not just you as a player improving, it's the character himself who is being shaped by these experiences. The transition from using a pistol with trembling hands to wielding an LMG and clearing an entire camp without blinking is gradual but noticeable, and the game has the wisdom to make you feel this evolution through gameplay. The real turning point, in my opinion, comes when Jason starts to enjoy the violence. There's a specific scene where he's doing another rescue, and after the action, one of his friends comments something like, "Damn, you seem excited about this," and Jason denies it. But you see in his expression that there's some truth there. It's disturbing because you, as a player, are probably also having fun. After all, combat in Far Cry 3 is visceral and satisfying. The game puts you in an uncomfortable position by making you question whether Jason is losing his humanity or just discovering something that was always there. His friends begin to notice the change and are frightened, but Citra and the Rock Yacht encourage him, treat him like a legendary warrior. It's in this contrast that the emotional depth really shines. You see Jason being pulled in two directions, and the choice of which side he will stay on is also your choice as a player. Jason's relationship with the Rock Yacht, and especially with Citra, adds complex layers to his transformation. Citra sees him as the warrior who will liberate them from Vaas and Hoyt, and she uses a mixture of mysticism, seduction, and manipulation to mold him into what she needs him to be. Each tattoo she makes on him is a ritual, one more step in the journey to become something greater, or something different. The problem is that this greatness that Citra promises comes at a huge cost: Jason's humanity. You notice this when he's with his friends and seems out of place, even bored, as if normal life no longer makes sense to him. But when he's hunting, fighting, exploring the jungle, he seems alive in a way that is simultaneously exciting and terrifying. The warrior tattoo that covers his arm is not just a visual representation of progression. It's a metaphor for how violence and power are literally taking over him. Jason's internal conflict reaches its peak in the moral decisions you need to make, especially at the end of the game. Without going into too many spoilers, the game forces you to choose between the person Jason was at the beginning, the guy who just wanted to save his friends and go home, and the person he has become, the warrior who found purpose and power through violence. What makes this choice difficult is that the game doesn't paint either side as obviously right or wrong. Jason has genuinely changed, and part of him likes this new version. He's good at it, he's important, he has power. Going back to being a rich tourist from Los Angeles seems almost impossible after everything he's lived and done. But at the same time, the alternative path means completely embracing violence and abandoning everything that connected him to his previous life. It's a cruel choice because there is no complete, happy ending. Whatever the decision, Jason has lost something fundamental in the process. The emotional depth of Jason's transformation works so well because the game had the courage to make it something ambiguous and even uncomfortable. It's not a story of a hero who discovers his inner strength and saves the day. It's a story about how trauma, violence, and power can fundamentally change who you are, not always for the better. Jason becomes ruthless and competent, yes, but at what cost? His relationships suffer, his sanity is questionable, and even his motivations become blurred throughout the game. The praised emotional depth comes from the fact that Far Cry 3 doesn't simplify this journey. It shows that becoming a warrior capable of killing dozens of people without hesitation is not simply a positive progression. It's a transformation that carries weight, consequences, and difficult questions about identity and morality. That's why, even years later, Jason Brody's story continues to be discussed and analyzed because it touched on something real about how violence changes people in irreversible ways. The first thing that grabs you in Far Cry 3 when you finally gain freedom to explore is the absurd beauty of the Rook Islands. It's not that sterile postcard beauty. It's a living, almost pulsating beauty, where you see rays of sunlight piercing through the treetops, creating that volumetric light effect that makes you stop just to appreciate it. The beaches have that white sand contrasting with the crystal blue of the ocean, palm trees swaying in the wind, and you almost forget that seconds ago you were running from pirates armed to the teeth. The game manages to create this visual duality in a way that few games have done before or since. It's literally a tropical paradise that is also your worst nightmare. You want to explore every corner because it's beautiful, but at the same time you know that behind that lush vegetation there may be a tiger waiting to tear your throat out, or a pirate camp ready to fill you with bullets. What really differentiates Far Cry 3 from other open-world games is how the island never lets you relax completely, even in the moments of greatest tranquility. You may be climbing a mountain, enjoying the breathtaking view of the archipelago stretching in all directions, listening to the ambient sound of nature, and suddenly you hear a low growl and realize that there's a bear a few meters from you. Or you're crossing a crystal-clear river, admiring how the water reflects the sunlight when a crocodile emerges from nowhere and pulls you down. The design of the wildlife is not just decorative. Each animal is a real threat that demands respect and attention. The island seduces you with its beauty and then punishes you for letting your guard down. It's this constant tension between admiration and paranoia that creates a unique immersion. You're never really safe, but you also never want to stop exploring. The variety of biomes in the Rook Islands is impressive considering that it's technically a relatively small archipelago, but this diversity is what keeps the exploration interesting for dozens of hours. You have the dense tropical forests where you can barely see the sky, fog-covered swamps where every step feels like a trap, open fields with tall grass perfect for ambushes, dark and claustrophobic caves that make you question whether it's worth getting that treasure, paradisiacal beaches that seem like calm before the storm, and steep mountains that offer panoramic views but also leave you exposed. Each region has its own visual identity and its own specific dangers. The swamps are not just wet forests. They have a heavy atmosphere, reduced visibility, and always seem to hide something in the murky waters. The mountains are not just elevations in the terrain. They offer alternative routes, tactical advantage, but also expose you to enemy fire and the predators that inhabit the heights. The design of the outposts and enemy camps integrates organically into the natural environment, and this is crucial for immersion. It doesn't seem like someone simply placed military structures randomly on the map. The pirates occupy strategic points that make sense. River slopes to control transport routes, hilltops for visibility, clearings in the forest near natural resources. There are camps built inside ancient ruins, taking advantage of pre-existing structures. Others are improvised shacks with wood and rusty metal. Some are more fortified with watchtowers and walls. When you liberate these posts, the island literally changes. Where before there were hostile pirates, now there are civilians from the Rakyat living their lives, hunting, trading. This visual and functional transformation of the environment as you progress in the game makes you feel that you are really making an impact, that the island is responding to your actions. It's a level of interactivity and visual consequence that adds layers to the immersion. Vertical exploration in Far Cry 3 is something that doesn't receive enough credit when talking about the island's design. Most open-world games of the time were basically flat with some elevations, but the Rook Islands have a rugged topography that invites you to climb, jump, use zip lines, paraglide. There are radio towers that you need to climb, and this climb is not automated. You need to find the way, jump between platforms, and a fall means death. But what motivates you to do this, besides unlocking parts of the map, is the view from up there. From the top of a tower or a cliff, you see the island stretching in all directions, the infinite ocean around, the fog-covered mountains in the distance, the dense jungle in all directions, small villages dotting the landscape, smoke rising from enemy camps. It's in these moments that you really appreciate the scale and beauty of the environmental design, and also feel that chill in your stomach, remembering all the dangers that beauty hides. What makes the island's design work so well is how the game uses the environment not only as a backdrop, but as an active part of the gameplay. You're not just running through beautiful places, you're using the tall vegetation to hide, setting fire to the grass to create chaos, using animals as biological weapons by opening bear cages in enemy camps, climbing trees to gain a tactical advantage, diving into rivers to escape pursuits. The island is not a static map with marked points of interest. It's a living ecosystem where everything interacts with everything. You may be chasing a deer to craft a better backpack, and suddenly a leopard attacks the deer, so you take advantage of the distraction to shoot the leopard. But the noise attracts a group of pirates who are patrolling, and then a shootout starts that scares a pack of wild dogs that attack everyone indiscriminately. These emerging moments where natural chaos and human chaos mix are what defines Far Cry 3, and are only possible because of how well designed the environment is. In the end, the Rook Islands are not just the setting of Far Cry 3, they are practically a character in themselves. The island has personality, history, and direct influence on everything that happens in the game. The seductive beauty of the island reflects the seduction that Jason feels for violence and power. The constant danger hidden behind every tree reflects his paranoia and psychological transformation. You understand why the Rakyat consider that land sacred, why the pirates want to control it, why Jason becomes so obsessed with dominating every corner of it. The unique immersion that the game creates comes from this perfect combination between the aesthetic and the functional, between the contemplative and the visceral. You can spend hours just exploring, hunting, admiring the sunset over the ocean, but always with a finger on the trigger, always aware that paradise and hell coexist in the same space. It's this tense and fascinating balance between beauty and brutality that makes the Rook Islands one of the most memorable and well-designed settings in the history of video games. Far Cry 3's progression system achieves something that few games of the time did so well. It makes you feel like you're really evolving as a character, not just numerically, but tangibly in the gameplay. When you start the game, Jason is literally incompetent. He stumbles, can't shoot properly, gets tired quickly, can't carry much ammo. But as you earn XP by completing missions, killing enemies, liberating outposts, and exploring the island, you accumulate skill points that can be spent in 3 distinct trees. The Heron, focus on ranged combat and mobility. The Shark, melee combat and resistance. And the Spider, stealth and survival. What's brilliant about this is that the game gives you the freedom to shape Jason the way you want to play. If you prefer to be a silent sniper, you can invest in skills that increase your accuracy, aiming stability, and ability to move stealthily. If you like direct action, you can focus on increasing your health, damage resistance, and melee combat skills. The visual representation of progression through tattoos on Jason's body is a brilliant touch that goes beyond the simple skills menu. Each skill you unlock adds an element to the tribal tattoo that covers his forearm, and as you progress, the tattoo grows, climbing up his arm and eventually covering part of his torso. This creates a visceral connection between the game mechanics and the narrative. You literally see Jason being transformed and marked by his experiences on the island. It's not just a number going up on a screen, it's a permanent mark that shows how much he has changed. And when you look at your arm during gameplay, you see that complex and detailed tattoo. You feel the weight of all those skills you've acquired, all those lines you've crossed. It's a constant visual feedback of your transformation journey that reinforces both the gameplay and the story. The freedom of choice in skills really matters because different builds drastically change the way you play. I personally started focusing on stealth. I quickly picked up the silent kill skills from above and below, the ability to drag bodies, silent movement, and noise reduction. This allowed me to approach outposts as an invisible predator, eliminating enemies one by one without anyone noticing. But there are players who go straight for the combat skills, picking up health increases, faster regeneration, resistance to explosions, and turn the game into a completely different experience. More chaotic, more direct, more visceral. The game doesn't force you to follow a specific path. It gives you the tools and lets you decide what kind of warrior you want to be. And the best part, as you progress, you eventually manage to unlock skills from multiple trees, creating hybrid builds that combine elements from different playstyles. The crafting system perfectly complements the skill progression and adds another layer of RPG that encourages exploration. You can't simply buy better equipment. You need to hunt specific animals to get the skins needed to make larger backpacks, holsters that carry more weapons, expanded ammo pouches. This transforms hunting from something optional into something essential and forces you to explore the island looking for rare animals. Need a better backpack? You'll have to hunt bears. Want to carry more grenades? You need goat skin. Want the ultimate holster? You'll have to find and kill a rare Komodo. This mechanic is brilliant because it creates a progression loop that keeps you constantly engaged. You do missions to earn XP and money, use the XP to buy skills, use the money to buy weapons and ammo, and hunt to expand your capacity to carry all of that. Each system feeds the other, creating a constant sense of progression and improvement. The freedom of exploration in Far Cry 3 is not just about having a large map, it's about how the game rewards curiosity and experimentation. The map is filled with side activities, collectibles, optional challenges, and organic discoveries that you find simply by exploring. There are radio towers that function as vertical puzzles and unlock parts of the map. There are relics hidden in unlikely places that tell stories of the island through their descriptions. There are lost playing cards that reference the characters and events of the game. There are hunting missions that challenge you to kill specific animals with specific weapons. There are racing trials, target shooting challenges, supply deliveries. And all of this is optional. You can completely ignore it and focus only on the main story. But if you're the type of player who likes to see everything that an open world has to offer, Far Cry 3 rewards you generously with XP, money, and more importantly, unique experiences. What really differentiates Far Cry 3 from other shooters of the time is how it integrates all these RPG elements organically instead of just putting them on top of the traditional gameplay. It doesn't seem like someone took an FPS and simply added XP bars and skill trees because it was fashionable. Each system has a purpose and connects to the other systems. The skill progression literally changes how you play, opening up new tactics and possibilities. The crafting forces you to interact with the island's ecosystem in meaningful ways. Exploration is not just running through an empty map. It's discovering secrets, completing challenges, and feeling that every corner of the island has something interesting. And all of this happens in a world that reacts to your actions. Liberate outposts, and they become safe. Complete hunting missions and the animals become rarer. Destroy alarm cars and the pirates lose that tactical advantage. It's a holistic approach to design that makes the game feel cohesive instead of a collection of disconnected mechanics. In the end, the RPG elements and the freedom of exploration in Far Cry 3 elevate the game from a competent shooter to a genuinely memorable and replayable experience. You can play the game 3 times focusing on completely different builds and have distinct experiences. You can do a pure stealth run, eliminating entire outposts without being detected. You can do an aggressive combat run, going in guns blazing and using explosives. You can do a mixed run, adapting your approach situationally. The game gives you the tools and respects your intelligence enough to let you discover what works best. And the feeling of progression never stops. There's always a new skill to unlock, better equipment to craft, a new area to explore, an optional challenge to complete. It's this respect for the player's agency, combined with satisfying progression systems and an open world rich in possibilities, that makes these elements the most praised strengths of the game. Far Cry 3 proved that you can make a first-person shooter with RPG depth without sacrificing the frenetic action that defines the genre. Vaas Montenegro is probably the most memorable villain that games produced in the 2010s, and it's no exaggeration to say that he practically stole the entire game. From the first scene, when he captures you and starts that monologue about the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over expecting different results, you know you're facing something special. Michael Mando's interpretation is so visceral, so unpredictable, that you feel genuinely uncomfortable watching his scenes. He changes emotions in the blink of an eye. 1 second, he's calmly philosophizing about insanity. The next, he's screaming and breaking things. And then he goes back to that disturbing smile as if nothing had happened. It's not a cartoonish or overly exaggerated performance. Vaas is terrifying precisely because he seems real. Seems like someone genuinely unstable that you could find in a life or death situation. What many people don't know is that Vaas almost didn't exist in the way we know him. Originally, the main villain of Far Cry 3 was going to be a giant, muscular, bald guy named Bull, who was basically a generic brute. But when Michael Mando auditioned for some role in the game, he completely improvised, didn't follow the script they gave him, and the developers were so impressed that they redesigned the entire villain to match his appearance and acting style. They even changed the character's name to Vaas because they couldn't make the old 3D model work with Mando's facial expressions. This last-minute decision to transform the villain into a completely different character based on an improvised audition is the kind of risk that rarely works. But when it does, it creates something truly special. Vaas wasn't meticulously planned. He emerged organically from the performance of a talented actor who instinctively understood how to make that character work. The speech about insanity became so iconic that it transcended the game itself. It became a meme. It became a cultural reference. Everyone who played Far Cry 3 can quote at least part of it from memory. But the brilliance of that monologue isn't just in the words, it's in the delivery. The way Vaas starts by calmly asking, "Have I ever told you the definition of insanity?" As if he were going to start a genuine philosophical conversation, and then gradually increases the intensity, becoming more agitated, more passionate about the concept, until he explodes in fury. And the most disturbing thing, he's talking about insanity, but he's also talking about himself, about Jason, about the cycle of violence that defines the entire game. Vaas kills Jason multiple times, or at least tries to, and Jason keeps coming back. They keep facing each other, doing the same deadly dance repeatedly. Who is the insane one in this equation? the psychopath or the playboy who turned into a murderer and is enjoying it. The speech works on multiple layers, and the more you think about it, the deeper it gets. Vaas's relationship with Jason is fascinating because they are distorted mirrors of each other, and Vaas seems to recognize this long before Jason does. He sees in Jason someone who is going through the same transformation that he went through, from a normal person to something different, something more dangerous. There's a scene where Vaas says to Jason something like, "You're just like me," and you see that flash of recognition, almost of sadness, as if Vaas saw his past in Jason's journey. Vaas is not just an obstacle to be overcome. He is a prophecy of what Jason can become if he continues on that path. And the scariest thing is that as the game progresses, you start to see that Vaas is right. Jason is becoming as cruel and ruthless as him. The difference is that Jason justifies himself by saying that he's doing this for his friends, for survival, but Vaas has already passed that stage of self-deception. He has completely embraced what he is, without excuses or justifications. The fact that Vaas dies in the middle of the game, more or less halfway through the story, is one of the most courageous and controversial narrative decisions of Far Cry 3. When you finally face and kill Vaas in a hallucinogenic and surreal sequence, you feel a mixture of relief and emptiness, because Vaas was the driving force of the game. He was the one who made the story interesting, and suddenly he's gone and you still have half the game ahead fighting Hoyt Volker, who is a completely bland villain in comparison. The developers said that this choice was inspired by a book where the protagonist dies in the middle, and the rest of the story explores his absence. It's risky because you potentially lose the player's interest, but it also reinforces that the story was never really about defeating Vaas. It was about Jason's transformation. And with Vaas dead, Jason no longer has that psychological mirror, that constant reminder of what he is becoming. Vaas's absence in the second half makes you miss him, which is bizarre considering that he tried to kill you multiple times. Michael Mando's performance is what elevates Vaas from a well-written villain to a truly iconic villain. It's not just that he delivers the lines well, he brings layers of broken humanity, trauma, disturbing charisma, and genuine unpredictability that make Vaas feel three-dimensional. You see in his eyes that there is a person there who was destroyed by something, drugs, betrayal, violence, and that the psychopath he has become is both a mask of survival and his true nature now. The micro-expressions, the body language, the way he moves between calm and explosive without warning, this all comes from Mando bringing his own interpretation and improvisation to the role. The developers compared Vaas to Darth Vader, saying that he appears in short scenes but leaves a lasting impact, and it's a fair comparison. Every second that Vaas is on the screen, you can't take your eyes off him. He completely dominates any scene he participates in, and when he's not there, you feel his absence. In the end, Vaas Montenegro became iconic because it was a perfect combination of intelligent writing, bold character design, and mainly an acting performance that elevated everything to another level. He's not just another video game villain shouting generic threats. He's a complex, disturbing, charismatic, and tragic character who functions as a mirror, antagonist, and constant presence even when he's not physically in the scene. The speech about insanity resonated so much because it touched on something universal about repetition, expectation, and the thin line between sanity and madness, but also because it was delivered with an intensity that you rarely see in any media, not just in games. Vaas proved that video games can have villains as memorable as any movie or series, and set a standard so high that Far Cry spends more than a decade trying to capture that same magic again without ever completely succeeding. He's not just the villain of Far Cry 3, he's the face of the entire franchise, appearing in all promotional materials, more remembered than the protagonist himself, and continuing to be discussed and analyzed years later as the definitive example of how to make an unforgettable antagonist.
Stop the truck! Take it easy on yourself! Never stop waiting for that!